Monday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. We are back to discuss 3 total Ducks games. So we've got a lot to get into here. Ever since the trade deadline, our last big show that we did, the Ducks are essentially a brand new team, and we're going to take a look at how they've done since that time, which players have stood out in both good and bad ways. Jake, are you ready to do this?
I think I am. Are you ready?
You think?
I
I am
think.
absolutely
I
ready.
think.
I am born
Do
ready
we
for
want to
this.
pull back the curtain a little bit on to fans of the podcast for what we're doing though on top of
Yeah. So just as a quick housekeeping note, I put this out on Twitter earlier today, but essentially this summer, or after the regular season ends for the Ducks, which means their season will be over, we will be moving on from the SB Nation platform officially. We're going to go onto our own independent platform, 99%. That's what we'll be doing. And so we need a new show name. And so if you have any ideas for what we could call our show, hit us up on Twitter. Let us know in the Twitch stream. We are just trying to get some ideas here, so anything is really appreciated. Also, with the season winding down now, with there essentially being about a month and a half left in the regular season and the Ducks schedule really winding down here, we are going to be doing one show a week. We're going to be doing one weekly show for a multitude of reasons, but you can expect that to be either on weekends or kind of beginning of the week like this, like we've been doing. I don't think we'll be doing many middle of the week ones because we want to let the games pile up a little bit so we have more to talk about.
And the format for next season is not set in stone for what we're going to be doing. So actually what would be appreciated is if you want to reach out and let us know what your preferred format. We're not completely nixing the idea of doing post-game shows again next year, but if you prefer us to do just 2 shows a week, let us know about that, and we can provide the content in the best way that you want to see it, basically.
Exactly. So this is more of just for now. For next season, we still have a lot of figuring out to do, a lot of workshopping to do, so we're going to get there. But right now, we've got some games to talk about. So let's start with the game that occurred last Tuesday. The Ducks playing the Edmonton Oilers. So this was the first game after the trade deadline. The Ducks won this one 4-3. And we were going to introduce a new segment today, but we're not going all in. But we were going to introduce starting with a headline because you know how the Ducks do their headlines, Ducks headline. Mine was going to be, it's always sunny, as in Sonny Milano in Anaheim. Sonny Milano in this game had 2 goals, including the overtime game winner, drew 2 key penalties, and overall just looked really good next to Ryan Getzlaf and Ricard Raquel. So let's just get some quick thoughts on this one, Jake. What did you make of this performance for the Ducks, especially in a game where they essentially had a brand new roster?
Yeah, so I thought this was a pretty good performance by the Ducks team. I thought Sonny Milano looked really good next to Ryan Getzlaf, and especially, one of the biggest talking points from this game, honestly, is the power play in overtime. The fact that they went for 4 forwards and no defensemen, and on a 4-on-3 power play. And now, granted, part of that is due to, we should also mention, Hampus Lindholm left this game due to an injury, and so the options on the blue line to provide
behold, they scored though.
Yeah, to provide some offensive talent is gone. But I think the really noticeable thing was instead of having Ricard Raquel out there, they had Sonny Milano, which, I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily view it as a shot at Ricard Raquel. I more so think they maybe wanted to have someone
just rewarding Milano for the game he was having.
And I think it also leaves Ricard Raquel for the second unit. And Milano really kind of repaid that faith by switching spots with Adam Henrique and ended up potting the overtime winner. So had 2 goals in his debut as a Duck and looked pretty good doing it. Showed some skill. Showed kind of why he was taken 14th overall in the draft. What would that have been, 2014?
Yep.
And so really great to see that. I think the big takeaway is the Hampus Lindholm injury, though.
Right. So for those who didn't see it, was this in the second period, if I'm remembering correctly?
Period.
Yes. Second period, Hampus Lindholm goes hard, falling into the corner, and they had to help him off the ice, and do we even know yet if it's a concussion or a shoulder issue?
No, no one officially
So
from the organization has said a thing about it.
mum has been the word, and that is really unfortunate because to me that looks like an injury that's going to keep him out the rest of the season. We are left to speculate, and so
Yeah.
we don't want to go too much into that. But that is the big takeaway: is that Hampus Lindholm suffered what looked to be a pretty bad injury, had to miss the rest of the game, and hasn't played since.
Yeah. Yeah. So just a shame. On the whole, the numbers on the night, not amazing for the Ducks. 3.78 expected goals for the Oilers, 1.82 for the Ducks.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is due to the third period push from the Oilers, which is to be expected. If you look at the chart, which I'll throw up on the screen right now, you can see there's a massive just kind of leap by the Oilers in that third period. So not the best job defending by the Ducks, but they were able to get it to overtime and were able to get the 2 points out of it. And the fact that they did it,
yeah,
they did this without Hampus Lindholm on the blue line, and so their blue line for about half the game was Matt Irwin, Christian Djoos, Josh Manson, Michael Del Zotto, Jacob Larson. Not exactly a great.
That's
core.
what I was gonna say. Is that I don't really I don't put a whole lot of stock in that third period because on one hand, the Ducks maybe should defend a little better there, but you're facing one of the most high-powered offenses in the league just on pure talent, and you're doing it without Hampus Lindholm, without Cam Fowler, and without Eric Goodbranson. So, and also that Oilers team, they didn't win that game, but McDavid with Athanasio and Ennis is a lot more interesting than McDavid with, let's say, Zach Kassian. And so that was that was a high-powered team that's in a playoff race.
Yeah.
And so I think it was to be expected for the Ducks to kind of get kicked in a little bit in that third period, but they managed to hold on. John Gibson was good enough, and they won the game in overtime.
Yep.
So anything else you wanted to add about this Edmonton game?
I think that the most noticeable player was Sonny Milano out of the new guys. I think if we're really trying to focus on them as a whole, I don't think the Danton Heinen or the Adam Henrique, Danton Heinen, and Kiefer Sherwood line really looked that fantastic on the whole. We should note, by the way, prior to this game, all the paper transactions happened. And so of note are Troy Terry was sent down and Brendan Gooley were sent down. The players that were sent down on paper transactions and called up. And the reason why this is important is, for those of you out there that don't know, in order to be eligible for the AHL playoffs, you have to be on the AHL roster come the trade deadline. So I believe that Christian Djoos, Sam Steele, Max Jones, Troy Terry, Brendan Gooley were all, and Kiefer Sherwood also, were all sent down prior to the trade deadline. And then Kiefer Sherwood, Max Jones, Sam Steele, and Christian Djoos were all recalled afterwards. You are only allowed 4 actual recalls after the trade deadline, but you are allowed unlimited emergency. There is potential that 2 of the recalls were emergency based upon injury situations. So the Ducks potentially have 2 more left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moving on here to the Pittsburgh game on Friday, I thought that this was one of the Ducks' better games of the season. And maybe they weren't dominant in this game, but everything just kind of seemed to click. So the Ducks won this one 3-2. Danton Heinen, who you just took a shot at, scored a goal in this game. Also had an assist in his first game. I should point that out.
Yes, he did.
Sonny Milano assisted again in this game, or picked up a point again in this game, was a secondary assist. And then just overall, I thought that this was a good performance from the Ducks. Ryan Getzlaf getting on the board. Brendan Gooley getting on the board, something that we haven't seen in a while. Jason Zucker made it kind of interesting at the very end. He got a shot on Gibson that they were saying on the broadcast deflected off of Jacob Larson's stick. If it did, it was the very slightest of deflections. So Zucker skating down the wing on the left side and shoots it. And I think personally Gibson should have had that one. Zucker is a very good goal scorer, so maybe give him a benefit of the doubt there. Either way, though, the Ducks win that one. They actually, at the time, handed the Penguins their 5th straight defeat.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on this being a great performance. Now, I think all of it needs to be held in the lens of where this Ducks team is at.
And also who is suiting up for this team right now.
Who is suiting up for this team and what team they are playing, because I mean, you look at this, the total on the night, 3.55 expected goals for the Penguins, only 2.23 for the Ducks. The Getzlaf line was not great on the whole. But I think when you put it in the context of what the Ducks team are, I think it's good to see some guys gelling. I think there are concerns that come out of this game with the fact that the Deloria, Aggozino, Rowney line was the only one above 50% in terms of expected goals for percentage, and the Penguins had 3 different lines above 85%. So there are some concerns there, but it is good to see some continuity with the lines, and I think that was the biggest takeaway here from me. And you did see Milano gelling with Getzlaf. You did see Heinen finally get on the board. Finally,
Yeah,
I guess, in his second game.
Heinen with Kiefer Sherwood have looked pretty good together.
Yeah.
Sherwood especially just looks so reinvigorated since being called up. I shouldn't even say reinvigorated because he's always very consistent in his effort with the Ducks. And I think now being given a real opportunity playing next to Adam Henrique and Danton Heinen, that trio, although sure, statistically they haven't been that dominant, they have been really, if you look at the Ducks forward group, they've been the only other line so far that's provided any type of offense game to game. If you look at, for example, Max Jones and, just the bottom 6, it just has not been quite as impressive as the top 6. There's a pretty clear delineation there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other notable thing in this game, and that may go forgotten now, is that there were a lot of penalties. The refs kind of lost control of this one. It all started with Ryan Getzlaf getting an extra 2 minutes for unsportsmanlike conduct for talking back to the ref. The same thing happened to Evgeny Malkin later in the game, where after he took a penalty, he slammed his stick on the glass of the penalty box. So there were a lot of power plays in this game. There were a lot of special teams play. Maybe that affected the Ducks a little bit in terms of the overall numbers, but I thought this was a good effort. I thought that they got contributions from different pockets of the lineup. I mean, hey, anytime you get a goal from Brendan Gooley, you have to be happy.
Yeah,
if you're a Ducks fan.
And when you make the expected goals for 5-on-5, it's 0.88 to 0.84, so it's much tighter.
It was a pretty even game. I don't look at the all situations and think that's really the whole story of the game. Now, of course, you can't overlook power play and special teams, but when you look at the firepower that the Penguins can put out there versus what the Ducks have right now to defend them, it's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to the New Jersey game?
Yep. Let's keep on rolling here.
Okay. So this is kind of unfortunate because to me, the best game the Ducks played out of the last 3 was easily that Pittsburgh game. Now moving on to the New Jersey game, this was a weird one. So the Ducks lose this one 3-0, and at times it felt like the Ducks were a little lackadaisical, didn't bring the same kind of energy that they brought on Friday against Pittsburgh. But then I would say halfway through the game, you saw them start to pick it up and really start pouring on the chances, power play opportunities. And yet Ricard Raquel just continues to be snake bitten as of late, denied on a breakaway, hit a post, missed an open net. That might have been Ricard Raquel's best game of the season without any points to show for it.
Yeah. And Dark Purity 993 throws in the Twitch chat, the Ducks lost to Schneider, not the Devils. I think Schneider had an absolutely outstanding game.
Corey Schneider had a vintage Corey Schneider game, which, good for him, by the way.
Yeah.
Should also mention in this game that this was the debut for David Backes. Of course, the return piece in the trade that sent Andre Kasha to the Boston Bruins. So David Backes lined up on the 4th line for Anaheim alongside Nick Deloria and Carter Rowney. So a real throwback 4th line for the Ducks. And then Sam Steele sat out that game. Andrew Aggozino replaced him on the 3rd line with Silverberg.
Potentially due to the flu. Nothing confirmed on that front,
we have no idea.
Yeah.
But Sam Steele did not play. And so the Ducks had a center lineup of Getzlaf, Henrique, Aggozino, and Backes. So not exactly what you want if you're trying to win every single game, but if you're trying to get into the Lafreniere Derby, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world.
This was a good game for those that want the Ducks to tank down the way. I mean,
at this point, these games don't matter. Well, all these games matter for now is identifying who's going to be part of the solution going forward.
Kind of going on that point, I want to ask you this question. because this is something that comes to mind, and I'm curious for your opinion on it. Because some people threw that at me when I asked why is Steele not in the lineup and Aggozino is. And,
well, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and one thing real quick I do want to mention on Aggozino. For anyone out there, he was not brought to the Ducks to go to the goals. He cannot go to the goals. He cannot play for them in the playoffs. If the Ducks want to, they can put him on waivers. Most likely, Pittsburgh claims him back and eventually will send him down. But because he was a waiver claim, he has to be on the Ducks. But I wanted to kind of bring this up to you, though, on this, and I think it's an interesting discussion topic of, do you think there is a worthwhile argument to be playing guys to see what you have instead of letting younger guys play and develop?
So here's the thing. I just want to point out before we talk about get on that, Andrew Aggozino has been in the NHL or in pro hockey since 2012-13. And since that time, he has played 41 NHL games.
Yeah, not great.
And he's 29. I am really not sure what the thought process is here. Maybe it's a guy that Dallas Eakins saw in the AHL and really liked. He did play for Colorado in 18-19, so same conference as the San Diego Golds. But even still, I am just not. I mean, Aggozino is getting power play time. He is getting legit opportunities that he has never gotten in his career.
Yeah,
or at least not for a while. So that is confusing, and I'm just going to leave it at that. It's confusing. Not sure what the point is, but that's just me. Take it or leave it. Now, as far as the situation with finding out what you have moving forward,
because I
don't think that has to be mutually exclusive. So to me, you should be playing the young players at all costs. I think accountability is important, and if they have horrid performances, then you have to potentially scratch them. But there's a way to do this without sacrificing the ice time of the younger players, and it seems like right now the Ducks are choosing a bit of a different lane. So Troy Terry is down in the AHL, and I think they just want him for the stretch run. They want him to get meaningful games under his belt, which at the end of the day is not the worst thing in the world.
I don't love it personally, as you can probably imagine.
I know you don't love it. And then as far as Sam Steele, let's just wait and see if we find out what happened in this game. If so, I'll look at it from both ways. So if it turns out that he was scratched just due to performance reasons, that is very confusing because the alternatives don't seem to really make sense in the big picture unless the Ducks view David Backes as potentially an important piece of their roster next season and potentially Andrew Aggozino as well. And if he was sick, well, then forget everything I just said.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that is my concern, honestly, is the fact of you want those guys playing, especially down the stretch, when, let's be real here, these games don't matter. They're not important in the grand scheme of things. They're actually more important for the Ducks to lose, honestly.
I think saying these games don't matter isn't the right way to frame it. It's the outcome of these games.
Yes.
Doesn't matter.
Fair. That is true. And I think that's important to have the kids playing in these games to be able to get those minutes underneath them and get the reps underneath their belt. And that's kind of my argument for why Troy Terry should be up right now also. He should be getting those reps and go down to the goals at the end of the year. And it's very honestly frustrating and puzzling to me that he was sent down, and a guy like, I know people love Kiefer Sherwood, but Kiefer Sherwood's 25. He's not the future of this franchise. He's not going to be a top-line player. I think that there's more benefit to having a guy like Troy Terry up.
It's unfortunate that was the swap that was made, because I personally think that Kiefer Sherwood deserves the opportunity. I think Kiefer Sherwood should have been on the team since the start of the year.
So agreed. I do agree.
That's the unfortunate thing, is those two players are kind of pitted against each other in the eyes of maybe some fans. But I think ultimately they both have a place on the team.
I think that maybe they should just play both those guys over playing Carter Rowney or Nick Delorier.
Well, the Ducks are locked in to both of those guys.
Yeah.
So those guys are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to go somewhere for a quick moment here. We're going to jump into our first break. But on the other side of that break, we are going to get into a new segment, brand new segment. I'm excited for it because I have no idea what's going to happen. So we'll be right back. Okay. So back from the first break. So we are introducing a new segment to the show today. We're calling it Jake's Takes. As you know, Jake Rudolph, my co-host, my dear friend, is
Hey, we're friends now?
is a very
Wow.
opinionated person.
I am?
He has takes, he has
I
opinions.
do?
And so
This is news to me.
instead of fighting off his opinions throughout the entire show, I'm thinking, let's give Jake the floor here. Give us 3 bold Jake takes. They don't have to be bold, but just tell us your thoughts. I will react to them, and we will work our way through them. So, Jake, the floor is yours. Give us the inaugural take of Jake's takes.
Can I get 4, right?
No, you get 3. I just said 3.
I'm going to do 3 hockey and 1 non-hockey.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you an exception since this is the maiden voyage, but in the future, we will have to discuss that.
Matt Irwin is very much not good. In the New Jersey game,
explain.
In the New Jersey game, that power play goal was garbage against where he basically got walked by, I believe it was Rooney, or no. Actually, I'm spacing on who it was on the Devils, but he got absolutely walked, and everyone.
I think it was Jesper Bratt.
Yeah, it was Bratt, and everyone was just kind of staring at him. And you look at the numbers, Matt Irwin, his numbers on the whole are not great. Constantly under 50% in terms of expected goals for percentage. So yeah, there's take 1.
Okay,
Matt
so
Irwin,
now
really not good.
Now let me react to that take. So his numbers have not been good, undisputable. What's interesting to me is there is such a disparity with Matt Irwin from when he's in his own zone to when he has the puck. So when he has the puck, I actually think he's a good pass first, or a good kind of pass first breakout defenseman where he's able to find the guy who's curling. He's very effective in that way, moving the puck. But defensively, we've seen a couple plays now where he's either caught out of position or he gets burned. And a few years ago, Matt Irwin was a bit of an analytics darling. So it's kind of interesting that now this script is totally flipped, and why he's getting traded for Corbin and Holzer, why a team would think that Corbin and Holzer would be the answer over Matt Irwin. I am willing to give him a little bit of time to see, once the Ducks have their true defensive lineup back in place, which probably won't be until next season. We'll see if Irwin is even around by then. I would just be curious to see what he can do in a more normal environment.
Yep.
Okay. Number 2.
Do the takes have to be Ducks related?
Well, let's keep them Ducks related. You need at least 2 out of 3 Ducks related.
Yeah, so this one's not going to be Ducks related. Connor McDavid is just stupid.
Okay, so it's pertaining to the games, though.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
fair.
Connor McDavid is just stupid. Watching him in that game, and you actually had a front row seat. How you were the rinkside reporter this week, actually.
I was at 2 Ducks games this week, which is,
and I was at none.
That was easy. That has to be a record for me.
It's definitely a record.
I do want to give a shout out. So yesterday, our good friend Bonnie and Bob gave me or invited me to come out to. They had a free ticket right behind 3 rows behind Gibson, so that was really awesome. Got to hang out afterwards, and just a great time. Had a great view of the game. And then on Tuesday for work, I just got really lucky, and someone bailed out of a group, and I was able to go and sit along the glass, which I've never done at a hockey game. So I got to sit very close. And Connor McDavid up close is kind of ridiculous. As someone who plays hockey and is kind of accustomed to seeing a certain type of player in front of me physically, seeing a guy like Connor McDavid who defies what I think anyone could actually do on a hockey rink is pretty amazing.
I mean, the thing that, and this is kind of where the take comes from, what he can do at just such a high speed, and the fact that he can change his speed so quick. There was one play where he broke into the zone, and I think he walked around someone and then had a one-on-one with
probably did
one-on-one with Gibson, and Gibson came out unchallenged, but he threw on the brakes so hard there, and the fact that he's able to do that with the puck on his stick, it's just it's a sight to behold. And it's one of those, there are a few players in the league where I watch and sometimes you just can't get mad at what happens because he's just that good. Yeah. And it's also probably because the Ducks aren't in the playoff race, so they're not battling those points.
He does that to everyone, though. And the thing is, what impresses me, it's almost, if you look at old footage of Michael Jordan and how he would jump up into the air and contort his body midair to get a layup or a dunk, McDavid is almost like the hockey version of that, because he will be coming in at 100 miles an hour, and then he'll contort his body and swivel his hips, and all of a sudden change speeds, change directions in the blink of an eye, and just break his defender. He's very good. He might not win the MVP though. He might not. He's probably not going to win any hardware this year, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. And hot take number 3, or Jake take number 3. Rickard Rakell is still so good, and even though he hasn't scored in 15 games, is it something like that?
He hasn't scored in a while.
Yeah, he hasn't scored in a while. This is not a bad season for Rakell. This is just going to be one where you're going to look back, and the thing is, there are guys in the NHL where you can look at their hockey reference page, and I'm actually pulling up Rickard Rakell's right now just as a for reference. But there are guys where you can look at their stats and be like, huh, that's weird that he only scored that many goals that year. And then you look at the shooting percentage and you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Well, his shooting percentage this year isn't incredibly low. It's 7.8%.
But it's still lower than probably where it would be. He's a career average about 12% shooter.
What is kind of concerning is that his shooting percentage has really dipped the last couple of years. Because if you go back to 17-18 and 16-17, so he went 18.6%, which I don't think he was ever going to keep that up, and then 14.8%. And since then, he's at a 9.3 and a 7.8. I agree with you. I think he'll get back up to his average, and I don't think that the Ducks should be concerned. But this is the kind of scenario you see where a guy gets traded, not because he's really done anything differently, but just because the bounce have gone his way. He's still shooting the puck a ton. He's still clearly their best forward.
Yeah.
And just not
I think,
bounce. Especially in that game. It was so you could just see how frustrated he was because he was getting the kind of chances you dream of in a game.
I think he's probably the Ducks' best player this season. I think that
that's fair.
I think.
Well, I mean, who else would it be?
Maybe maybe Silverberg. Maybe
there's not much competition. I mean, when healthy, I think Fowler, but Fowler took a dip. Even if you look at his point totals, not that that's the end all be all, but his scoring really took a nosedive.
Yeah. So sorry, Tony, but Rakell, and I mean, we saw it with the Andre Kasha trade. And now, granted,
it's interesting that neither of us even have Adam Henrique in that conversation, even though he's
having a
very good season. Yeah,
I just think that we both kind of view. I don't know how. That's actually an interesting conversation, an interesting thought of why don't we view Adam Henrique
he has 24 goals this season.
Yeah, which is kind of shocking. The fact that there's a Ducks player with 24 goals.
He hasn't had 24 goals in a season since 17-18. So it's been a little while.
Yeah. Real quick, this is a sidebar, but what do you think of David Backes in his first game?
Yes, I do think that. So are we done with the takes? I don't want to say I'm disappointed.
My takes are always reasonable, unless they're about Troy Terry.
Yeah, maybe that's the thing.
Troy Terry's not on the team. All right,
no Troy Terry.
Here is the non-hockey take for all of you out there.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about David Backes first.
Fine.
I think the listeners care a little bit more about that than what I'm assuming will be wrestling.
How did you know?
Oh, I know. David Backes played in his first game. Did not play a heck of a whole lot. Did not really do a whole lot, but he was out there taking the body, trying to be a physical presence. Really, it just looked like he was trying to get his legs underneath him. You could tell that there was some jitteriness to his game. I didn't think he looked... I don't really have a strong opinion about it. I don't think he looked either good or bad. My question is more, where does he fit into the future of this team? Yeah.
Well, I'm really curious. So my initial thought is I just thought the biggest thing was he looked slow. And the issue...
He is slow. Make no mistake. That is... Speed is not his calling card.
Yeah, it's not. And the issue that you have is guys that are slow need to make up for that in some way. And for instance, Ryan Getzlaf. Ryan Getzlaf is slow, but
Ryan Getzlaf had a breakaway, by the way, against New Jersey.
Yeah. But the thing is, he makes up for it with his elite playmaking and elite type of vision that he still kind of has, and that's the key there. And I don't know what David Backes does to make up for that lack of speed, and it was noticeable. It felt like we were watching the Ducks with Brian Kessler again.
Ooh, man, you are cutting deep there.
Do you agree or disagree?
He played 11:44.
There is your take. David Backes is the equivalent to Ryan Kessler last year.
I do think there's an argument to be made that the front office looked at the center play of this team this season and thought that they needed some more size, some more jam, because you look at the centers that they've had outside of Getzlaf, it's been really a rotating cast, and they settled on Henrique and Sam Steele, who aren't really, neither of them is the most physical nor has the most size. They're more skill guys. And even as a fourth line center, Derek Grant provided value in certain ways, but he wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't even the most physical guy. And so I think they saw that as maybe an area of weakness that they wanted to address. I honestly think that could be a play here.
Do you think?
I'm not saying that that's correct, by the way. I'm just saying that would be the view that would make the most sense.
And now we're going off on a big tangent here, but this is something you and I actually even texted about a little bit over the past week. Mm-hmm. Do you think the Ducks overvalued David Backes and actually didn't get the proper return? Because, and so where this is coming from for those of you out there is that it was reported that I believe that Ondrej Kase could have gotten the Ducks a second and a prospect from Carolina. Is that correct? Pierre LeBrun reported that.
I have not heard that, actually.
I think it was on The Athletic that Pierre LeBrun or someone reported that a second and a prospect. Someone correct me if I'm off base here, but I thought I saw that somewhere. And so with that being the case, the Ducks got a first, a prospect, and Backes. So David Backes only took the pick from being a second to a first. Mm-hmm. That feels off. I think I probably overvalued what the contract should get you in return, and I'll admit that. And I think that you should get what I was thinking they should get. But I'm starting to wonder if the Ducks actually valued Backes in some way, and then that's why it only got them a first, and only took it from a second to a first. And also, I mean, Carolina's probably a mid-round pick to halfway or a quarter or 3/4 of the way through. Trying to do some.
It's not a high pick.
It's basically a difference in 20 picks is what we're talking about here. So does David Backes and taking on that bad deal, is that only worth 20 picks?
Yeah, I mean, you're not a fan of the deal.
Well, no, but I'm asking you as someone who was a fan of the deal or defended the deal.
I do think that looking at how the Ducks have handled David Backes so far, it is starting to indicate that they saw him as maybe not a positive asset in this deal, but not the negative asset that I think most people viewed him as this contract, this onerous deal that you couldn't take back under any circumstance. It seems like maybe they saw him as a guy who could potentially fit. And maybe right now it's just more of a cameo. It's maybe more of a tryout. We'll see what they do with him later on. But there is definitely a possibility that they valued Backes in this deal. That the fact that they get Backes and a first, or that they get a first and Backes and Axel Anderson, maybe that was a deal that they viewed really positively.
Do you think is a mistake?
Well, to me, I do think it was important for them to get a first-round pick. So yes. they checked that box through this trade. You know, like it or love it. I do think, or I should say, love it or hate it. Sorry. For some, it's like it or love it, but for others, it's love it or hate it. I do think it was important to get a first-round pick, and they accomplished that. Looking outside of that, though, I think the issue with this deal is that they did not get enough value outside of the pick. I understand that Ondrej Kase's value was pretty limited, and I actually think that we probably overrate how much of a market he truly had. I don't think there were that many. I don't think there were that many dance partners. But
it sounds like Carolina and Boston were it.
Yeah, but just in terms of raw value, I don't know if that was a great move for the Ducks. But it's hard for me to really go all in on that opinion because without ignoring, all the actual constraints that were at play here.
Yeah. Honestly, my biggest thing is looking at the value received from taking on David Backes, because there was a whole lot of talk about Bob Murray weaponizing cap space. And so if you're going to do it, get proper return. And so that's my biggest concern, is that they didn't get the proper return that they should have for David Backes. Another thing is, if you're going to weaponize your cap space, go all in. Don't have Boston retain salary. Just take the entire cap hit for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Weaponize that cap space. Don't kind of go half in on it. Get more for it because you're taking on more of the cap hit and giving Boston more flexibility in return.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that ultimately this deal is kind of a head scratcher.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's hard for me to feel awesome about it or horrible about it. It just kind of is.
That's
it just kind of is.
Well, I think that's how a lot of deals are.
Exactly. And if you lump all the Ducks trades together, that is kind of the takeaway a little bit. I will say though, because I feel like now we're delving a little too deep into that. I do think that if you look at though how the team has played since that time, even though they have been outplayed in pockets of each game, I do think that a lot of the guys that they have brought in have actually looked pretty good.
I would agree with that.
The one that I didn't really see coming, Christian Djoos on the back end, who was acquired from Washington for Daniel Sprong, I think he's looked really good with the puck on his stick. And I think that he maybe solves, depending what the Ducks end up doing with, I mean, this is totally separate conversation, but outside of considering the fact that the Ducks have a bunch of other left-handed D, Christian Djoos to me seems like a really good candidate to be their go-to third pairing left side D next year. Or maybe they just put him on the right side. I don't know.
I think the only concern that you have is where does he fit? Because
to me, even if he's your seventh defenseman, that's not the end of the world.
That is true.
He doesn't have to be in the lineup every night.
Well, and I think that if you look at it in this perspective, who would you rather have in the lineup, him or Jacob Larson? I think that you take Jacob Larson. I think
Larson looks.
I think where
he doesn't look good right now.
Where the real interesting conversation comes up is who would you rather have in your lineup? And I guess this kind of comes back to almost what we talked about with Sam Steele is, do you want the kid in the lineup or do you want and Christian Djoos is what? I think he's 25.
He's 25. Yeah, but here's the thing with that though. Jacob Larson isn't good.
Oh,
right now he isn't good. So this whole notion of play the kid, he's had every opportunity.
I wasn't talking about Larson actually. I was talking about Mahura.
Wow, so you're just skipping over Brendan Gooley?
I think at this point, it's about time to skip over him and start, because Mahura's been impressive, been really impressive in his time with the Ducks this year.
Right. Well, okay, but we'll have an opportunity to get into that because that's its own conversation. Fair. But I just wanted to throw in before we jump into the second break here that the guys who have come in, Sonny Milano has looked really good. Granted, he's getting the best of all opportunities, but he's making the most of it. And then I think Danton Heinen, he's not quite as he hasn't stood out quite as much as Sonny Milano, but he's just a different player from Nick Ritchie, and I do think that type of player, that more east-west style, and supposedly looking at some of the advanced numbers, reading Dom Luszczyszyn's article at The Athletic, that he's actually a little better defensively than Nick Ritchie is, which I found interesting. And then outside of that, Aggozino, I don't really understand where he fits, but he's looked okay. Is there anyone I'm forgetting out of all the new guys? Because I feel like, and then we talked about Matt Irwin already.
And Sonny Milano. I mean, we talked about him a little bit.
I did talk about Sonny Milano. But anyway, yeah.
That's what happens when you try to moderate the chat as we go.
Yes, yeah. So the point being here, I think that all the guys who have come in have looked pretty good. And I think that the Ducks, the way they're playing now, it's obviously not a perfect style. This is obviously not a finished product by any means, but I think that the way that they're playing offensively does resemble more of the kind of team that they should be moving forward. Just a bit more creative, a little less stagnant when they get into the zone, where with Kasha and Henrique, Kasha, for as good as he was, wasn't really this kind of dynamic offensive player. He was more get into the zone, get pucks on net, control down low, which is fine. But I think that you can tend to overvalue that a little bit. And I think that the guys that they brought in give them just a little more upside. And especially if Milano specifically can develop into a top line player, then the Ducks end up being a better team out of all these trades, which a better and deeper team, as we just talked about with the logjam on the blue line. So let's get into our second break here. On the other side, we are going to get into some listener questions, I believe, tie up some loose ends. So we'll be right back. Okay, back from the second break. Jake, is there anything else you wanted to touch on here before we potentially jump some questions?
You had one more thing you wanted to jump into, or do you want to save that for the next show?
Yes. So the big trend, this is another segment that I just totally forgot about. And the reason for that is because I basically just said it. So what we're going to do from here on out, this is another segment that we're introducing. So we've got Jake's Takes, where Jake just gets to go to town, tell us what he's thinking. And then on the flip side of that, we have the big trend. So zooming out from whatever we're talking about, whether it's a single game or a a set of games, we're going to look at, okay, what does this all mean? What do we think this means moving forward? It can be anything. It could be on the ice. It can be management wise. It can be anything. And so I basically just spelled it out before we went into our second break, but I'll reiterate, to me, the big trend from these past 3 games is just that the new players look good and are contributing, and to me, make a lot more sense moving forward. Now, I guess, what is your big trend? Just go into your big trend, just to make sure I'm not stealing yours, because I have a little add-on to mine.
I think that's pretty much fair. If I'm trying to go slightly different, is that lots of different players are giving opportunities for a lot of ice time, because the D pairs are really kind of shuffled up in terms of minutes over the last 3 games, with Josh Manson being 4th on the team in minutes, with Jacob Larson and Matt Irwin. So it really, I think a big trend is they're, like we talked about, they're trying to see what they have for better or for worse.
Yeah. So the other trend, so that the add-on that I wanted to get into is something that we were discussing before the break, this logjam on the blue line. If you look at the Ducks depth chart moving forward, they have so many defensemen that are all left-handed. Now, not all of them are signed through next season, so we'll see what they end up doing with them. But you've got Michael Del Zotto, Brendan Gooley, Jacob Larson. Down in the minors, you've got Josh Mahura. Now you've acquired Matt Irwin, Christian Djoos. That is 6 defensemen who are all left-handed. Who, it's funny how this all started last trade deadline when the Ducks traded Brandon Montour to go and get Brendan Gooley in a first-round pick. And we thought, well, this throws off the balance of the blue line, but ultimately, let's see how it shakes out. And it's almost as the Ducks have just doubled down on that now. Like, we don't care. They'll all be left-handed. We don't need any right-handed shots. So to me, the trend here is I don't really understand where this is going. Brendan Gooley is an RFA. He'll probably get re-signed with the Ducks. I think they'll qualify him. Jacob Larson, it just seems to me like there are just too many guys filling the same spot. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to make a decision on one of them, which it might be Jacob Larson. Most likely he re-signs with the Ducks and maybe is more in the minors next season. But how do you see his future, or any of these guys' future? What's your thought on that big kind of jumble right now for this team?
I honestly have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, let me just add a little more context. So Matt Irwin is a UFA. So who knows if he's back? Michael Del Zotto is a UFA. Who knows if he's back? Although they kept him through the trade deadline. Not sure what that's all about. Christian Djoos is an RFA. Jacob Larson is an RFA. Brendan Gooley is an RFA. And let's see what Josh Mahura is up to. So Josh Mahura is not a free agent this summer. So what I'm trying to say here, folks, is that, and I should also add, Joel Persson, who they also went and got from Edmonton, is also an RFA. So the difference, for those who might not know, is that a restricted free agent essentially means that the team holds on to them. It's very rare that a guy doesn't stay on as a restricted free agent, whereas unrestricted, they usually leave. So to me, you have all these guys who are restricted, very few who are unrestricted, but I don't have any idea who's coming back. Because to me, you can't just bring all of them back. That wouldn't make any sense.
Is this a precursor? And Hardcore Luchador threw in our Twitch chat, can we have a segment called Trade Drunk? He's like, that would be fun. I think that's going to have to wait till the offseason, but as part of that, it's a segue. Do you think the Ducks are looking to move one of Lindholm or Fowler in the offseason?
Well, they sure picked up a lot of left-handed D guys who are under team control.
That's certainly interesting.
That's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. Now, reasonably, how many of these guys could step into that role? I mean, I don't see Christian Djoos being a second-pairing D-man after being a bit player in Washington for the most part. And now, who knows? Jacob Larson definitely can't step into that role. Brendan Gooley, I mean, he's all over the map. So I don't know if they're shopping one of those guys, because there just doesn't seem to be any viable replacement. That would significantly hurt this team if they moved on from one of those guys. We talk about Josh Manson being a loss. I think that he is less of a loss than either one of Fowler or Lindholm because of the position that he plays. The Ducks on the right side, if we're looking at it, there's not a whole lot going on there anyway. But on the left side, you're caving away at a pretty significant chunk of your team's defensive prowess. So I don't think they're shopping them. I just don't think it makes sense.
Yeah. All right.
Do you have a case for why they could be shopping them?
No, I just think the evidence is there that they've gone out and now acquired a bunch of left-hand shot defensemen. I wonder if maybe they are now looking to move one of their higher-paid left-handed shot defensemen for a potential game-changing type.
Do you think there is one? Do you think any of these defensemen don't receive a qualifying offer?
No, I think they all probably get qualifying offers.
That's what I think too. Because even though it doesn't make sense to bring some of them back, because A, they might not be very good, or B, they don't fit, it's never a bad thing to have depth. You know, if, like I was saying earlier, if Christian Djoos is your 7th defenseman, that's a better place to be in than they were than they were before the trade deadline.
Worst case scenario, you waive them at the start of the year, and if they're picked up by someone else, then that's no different than not giving them a qualifying offer.
So then Brandon Montour ends up being for Braden Tracy. If, let's say, Brendan Gooley ends up being that guy.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know how we will look back on that trade.
It's certainly interesting because this was something you and I also talked about. I think getting a first for Brandon Montour and getting Gooley is always going to be a great deal. But it certainly did create a hole on that right side that Bob Murray has struggled to fill. And it's one of those...
has he struggled, or has he just not filled it?
Has he? Well, he's failed to fill it.
Where has been the attempt to even fill it? I guess Yanni Hakanpää?
No, the attempt to fill it was trying to sign Kevin Shattenkirk. The attempt to fill it was trying to trade for Justin Falk. The
trade for Eric Goodbranson.
Yeah, exactly. And
man, think about that ladder. You go from Shattenkirk to Falk to Goodbranson.
Yeah, and so and the thing is, it all started because getting a first, like I said, for Montour, great deal. And this is the thing I think with not trying to sidetrack too much before we get into questions, but this is, I think, a trend with Bob Murray is you look at his individual deals, and a lot of them you can't really take a whole lot of issues with.
Mm-hmm.
It's the overarching trend that ends up becoming a concern with it, and that's the issue with the Brandon Montour trade. It's trading Brandon Montour.
Are the Ducks better today with Brandon Montour?
I think they're better right now with Brandon Montour.
But, I think it's still hard for me to really look back on that trade negatively, just because I don't know what Brandon Montour really does for this team right now.
Fair.
But it is weird.
It's the trend.
I just think
it's the trend.
Yeah, and you know, since I guess we're still on the big trend, I do think that at a certain point, Bob Murray will have to fix the situation.
Yeah.
He can't just go on. I know that the Ducks don't really see themselves as a rebuilding team. I don't know how they will see themselves going into next season. Let's say that they want to at least compete again next season. They can't go into it with a bunch of left-handed guys. There's kind of this thought process out there now that it's not so much about the handedness of the defensemen lining up, making it easier for them to pass to each other, but more just about getting more talented guys, which sounds fair, but the Ducks aren't bringing in these elite defensemen that can overcome that kind of thing.
It's not as if Christian Djoos and Joel Persson are those type of players.
They're not gonna break that mold. No. They're not gonna be the ones to do it. So you got to play by the rules a little bit.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's just interesting, honestly.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some questions. So for those of you listening to the recorded version of this on your favorite podcast service or watching it on YouTube, yes, we're on YouTube. Find us by searching for the AC Pod there. Also, if you're commenting on YouTube and want to throw potential names for the podcast in the comments, we will gladly accept them. We're scanning all options and going to pick the best.
We're crowdsourcing, as the kids say.
Exactly. But if you want to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, like and comment on the videos, it does help out a lot. But our real fun thing is our Twitch stream. You can help support the show on Twitch by subscribing to the show. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. We actually got a new Twitch Prime sub from Dan Grimshaw. So thank you so much to you for subbing to the show. With that, you help support the show in a way that's completely free to you and get special emotes in the chat. All right, so we got two questions that I wanted to jump into right away. The first one's from LewisX209. Do you think Trevor Zegras will end up being the best player coming out of the 2019 draft? Jack Hughes and Capo Caco have not looked great so far.
So I actually... two things on that.
Yeah.
One, I was at the game on Sunday and I got to see Jack Hughes up close. And I think maybe I wasn't sitting close enough 3 rows back of John Gibson. I think maybe I needed to sit a little closer to be able to see what he was actually doing on the ice, because he was not very effective.
Out.
I wasn't that impressed.
Called out.
You can see the skill, but you can also see the physical maturity is just so behind the eight ball. So at one point, I just want to finish this thought. So
yeah, go for it.
Jack Hughes and Ryan Getzlaf went into the corner chasing a puck, and it went about exactly as you would expect. Ryan Getzlaf launched Jack Hughes. It was not a fair fight. Now, the second thing I did want to bring up, so recently over at The Athletic, they had a podcast where Corey Pronman, their draft expert, was on. And right now, Trevor Zegras is at the top of his big board coming out of that class. So maybe the Lewis is onto something there.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that this is a 19-year-old in the NHL. I'm not saying it's completely out of the realm of possibility that there's potential Trevor Zegras could become the highest skilled or best player out of this draft, but I think the likelihood of that isn't high, and this season doesn't change that for me. Kakko only has 20 points also. Jack Hughes, I think, is at 21. I think that it's just we got used to world beaters coming out of the draft with Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid being back-to-back years, and that's just not the norm. I mean, you look at Nathan McKinnon. It took him a little bit of time to get established in the NHL, and now look at where he's at. So you look at it in that context, and I think Jack Hughes and Capo Kakko are still the class of that draft. I think that you just need to give it
too
time.
Early.
Can I also say this? I feel like I've seen some people, and I forgot where else, but some people mention that Sam Steele has more points than Jack Hughes as a rookie.
Well, one thing I do want to point out, just a slight correction, is that so for Corey Pronman, Zegras is at the top of his prospects list, so that doesn't include guys who are already in the NHL. So it wasn't a redraft. So he wasn't saying that they're better than Kakko or Hughes. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, so for this season, back to your point, this is interesting. So Sam Steele has the same exact amount of points, 21. He has 5 goals and 16 assists.
Yeah.
So Sam Steele greater than Jack Hughes?
I have seen some people try to say that, and
no, it's not close.
You gotta let's pump the brakes a bit here. This is getting way too kind of out there. I mean, let's not compare a guy that's 21, 22 to a 19-year-old. Let me
ask you this.
Yeah.
So the 21 points for Sam Steele versus the 21 points for Jack Hughes, what does either total say much about the player individually? So like for Sam Steele, 21 points for him, I guess, is somewhat disappointing because of the expectations that were rightly or wrongly placed on him. And then for Jack Hughes, it's the same thing. But I feel like maybe both expectations were wrong to begin with. What do you think of that?
I think that's probably fair.
I mean, Jack Hughes probably should have more than 21 points at this point.
You would think.
I think it was reasonable to expect maybe 40 to 50.
But I think still getting 21 points from a guy on an entry-level deal is still pretty good value.
And I just watch him, and I just think he's so physically just not there yet.
He needs to mature.
He has everything else. He has the foot speed. He's very skilled with the puck. He's quick. He's shifty, but I hate to, it feels like a old school kind of outdated take, but I do just think he needs to get stronger, and that'll allow him to establish himself on the ice a little more. And that's kind of how I feel about Sam Steele as well. Interestingly, Sam Steele is maybe a very poor man's version of Jack Hughes. Sam Steele is also older, but I think he does need to get a little stronger as well, because he's being asked to be a depth center or a third line center, and a lot of that is just winning battles.
Yeah. All right. So we got this question from Kempaf, who asks, why has Silfverberg been put in a defensive role again, even though he is one of the top producers in the team? So I don't know if I would say he's been put in a defensive role. I mean, he's been put with Sam Steele and Max Jones. And Max Jones, we've talked about it, has been one of the better play drivers on the Ducks. And so I don't know if that's necessarily a downgrade for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think that that's something to worry too much about with Silfverberg. Ultimately, I think that they're just playing out the string a little bit. I don't think that his role right now is really indicative of what he'll be next season. Or if he'll even be on the team next season if you're trade drunk Jake.
Yeah. Tony did mention that Sam Steele has been put up against the other team's best lines. And so I don't think that's necessarily putting him in a defensive role. That's putting because I think that we get caught up. I've mentioned this a bunch over the years that we've done this show, but I think we need to get out of our thought process of line matching, because at the end of the day, it's only one forward is going to be matched up against the other team's top line. It's not the defense at all. Now, yes, they will get caught in their own zone. Maybe they'll be in their own zone a little bit more because they're playing against a better line. But for the most part, especially as a winger, you're gonna be more matched up against the other team's defensemen and trying to negate that. And so I don't know if kind of looking at that matchup is necessarily a great way to assess whether he's been put in a defensive role or not.
Yeah, because defensive is one way to look at it. That's not necessarily wrong. It just means you're playing against the other team's best players, because that's the coach thinks you can withstand those minutes, that you're not going to get caved in. So it's not necessarily defensive. If it ends up being defensive, maybe that says more about the overall team, but that just shows that he's being trusted to play those minutes, because you're not putting like a fourth line out there, for example, to handle that. Unless Dallas Aikens is the coach, and then you put Derek Grant for all important faceoffs.
Yeah. The Bizarre Bith, by the way, just said subscribed with Twitch Prime. So thank you.
Thank you
so much.
That might be my big trend for next podcast, the Dallas Aikens audit. But we'll wait on that. We'll wait on that.
Okay. Bonnie asked, does it matter that you guys are talking about the guys you guys are talking about are millennials, and the new guys will be Gen Z?
Well, they might spend more time on TikTok or whatever medium they prefer. It is interesting because I think that if you look at the players coming up now, even if they're not necessarily top of the line players, every guy is coming up now as a skill guy. There's not really, before with the draft, guys were coming up with specific roles. Now it's more of just first to fourth line is almost just more best offensive ability is line one, and then it's just kind of a sliding scale downwards. Every guy can make a play now. And so I think that the biggest difference is that if a guy can come in and make a play, he might have this opinion of himself that he can play higher in the lineup. And maybe that's a little more difficult to integrate than a guy who comes in knowing, okay, I'm going to chip pucks in, hit some bodies, and get off the ice, a la David Backes right now or Nick Delorier. So the lines in the NHL right now, the roles are getting far less defined than they were in the past. And that is going to be interesting as, I would say the next 5 years goes along.
Yep. All right. That's probably going to do it for questions. Is it time? Is it time, Felix?
Time for what?
Is it time?
Time for me to read this awesome Apple Podcast review that we received?
I think we should do that after this.
I don't think this, quote unquote, is more important, but go ahead.
I mean, you saved the best for last, which is why we're saving the Apple Podcast review.
That's not what's happening here, but continue.
Felix is humoring me and letting me do my review of AEW Revolution. So here we go. It was a absolutely fantastic show. Colt Cabana made his debut with AEW on the pre-show, and then basically there were a couple matches that were just so good that I need to talk about. The Young Bucks versus Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page. Oh boy, one of the best tag matches that you'll see, in the storytelling in it. The fact that Hangman just now hates the Young Bucks and Kenny is the friend caught in the middle, and just all of the storytelling, every bit of action, everything like that, just so great. And then the other match I want to talk about is Orange Cassidy versus Pac. For those of you out there that may not like wrestling, that may just kind of humor me talking about this, like Felix, as he's sitting there all angry with his head below the microphone.
I'm not angry. I'm just checking Twitter.
Go check out an Orange Cassidy match. I guarantee you will laugh, because this guy understands that it's not real. And, well, understands is not the right way to put it. He understands how to entertain a crowd. And
is Orange Cassidy is that the new name for Ned, the Ducks fan?
No.
Oh, okay.
Orange Cassidy is a wrestler, and he is one of the most over people. And on AEW Dynamite, it was announced he was going to wrestle Pac, and his friend said he might try in the match. And oh boy, did he try along with his all of his gimmicks, and it was amazing. He puts his hands in his pockets when he wrestles. He just does not care. And it's so good.
Jake the wrestling fan.
It's so good. It's good.
Jake the wrestling fan. All right. Well,
so go check out Orange Cassidy versus Pac highlights. It's one of the most fun matches that you'll find, and it was also just a great and well put together match by Orange Cassidy and Pac.
Just say that you did, folks. Just make Jake happy. That's really the entire purpose of this podcast. When it all gets boiled down,
to make me happy.
So
I'm good with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty good deal for you. Okay, but we're gonna wrap this thing up though. Thanks everyone for listening today. Thanks for everyone who joined into our live Twitch chat. As always, feels good to be recording. Not quite as frequent as we've done in the past, but it's still a lot of fun once we're back behind the mic. Couple different ways that you can support the show. We have a Patreon page, so we provide bonus content each month, and there's a couple tiers that we offer, different ways that you can support us. So for $1 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat, which we do during games that are typically during the week on Pacific Standard Time. So if it's a East Coast game, even a Central Coast game, or a Central Time Zone game, that's going to be a little tougher. But during the game, when we're chatting, it's a lot of fun. We go back and forth, just talking about what's going on the ice, talking about really anything, and also doesn't necessarily have to be restricted to in-game. We also do, like if there's trades going on at the trade deadline, we had a lot of back and forth. So that's just for $1 a month. And I mean, if you're a fan of the show and you don't necessarily want to commit all the way, I think that $1 a month is a nice way to show some appreciation, and also you get something out of it. Now there's another tier, $5 a month. So on top of the Discord chat, you also get 2 bonus episodes a month, and these are a bit more broader in scope. So we go and talk about the rest of the NHL a bit more. We'll do different rankings, so like best coaches, or I think we did a best broadcast episode, which was a lot of fun. And also we do some Ducks deep dives. We also do movie reviews.
We do everything.
We just do it all.
We talk wrestling. We talk food.
Well, Jake talks wrestling, and I just kind of sit there. But if you enjoyed the banter of the show, I would definitely say that you would enjoy that for the $5 a month. So that's at patreon.com/acpod if you want to check that out. And the link to that will be in the description of the episode. Now, another way that you can support the show that is absolutely free to you, but does go a very long way. So on Apple Podcasts, if you leave a rating and a review, first off, we love to hear from you guys. And secondly, it actually helps us climb up the charts, gets us more noticed, and just kind of helps the show overall. And we got a really nice review here from JMG545. He left this on last Thursday, and this one was pretty awesome. So he said, "Hi all. As the title suggests," so his title says 2,700 miles away and thankful for this podcast. "As the title suggests, I live 2,700 miles away from Anaheim. I moved to Philadelphia for school right before the 2019-2020 hockey season began. Last year, I attended 37 home games, and this year, I've definitely been missing the community with the people that stay around me. I stumbled upon the Anaheim Calling podcast, and it really is a great listen. For one, whether or not you agree on a weekly basis, the conversations are insightful and enjoyable." Wow, thank you. Yes. "Additionally, the podcast helped me feel connected with the Ducks, and I'm very grateful for that. I just subscribed to the Patreon site, thank you again, and I'm excited to support the show and listen in the future. Great job, guys. Keep it up. From the Ducks fan living in Philly." Wow, that was an awesome review. Thank you so much for that. Yes. So yeah. And I just type in Anaheim Calling on Apple Podcasts, and you can go and do that.
Yep. And thank you so much. So that's exactly what we go for. Whether you agree with everything we say or with nothing we say, we hope that we can at least entertain you over this hour to hour and a half from what we do.
And at the end of the day, we want to give you the best possible coverage of this team that you can get in podcast format. That's really the goal. At least that's my goal. on top of having a lot of fun, is that there are a lot of podcasts out there. You have a lot of choice. And to me, when you're a fan of a team, you want to have a source that you can trust to give you all the information, give you all the angles, and just kind of let you come to your own decision of how you feel, but also get presented with all the sides. And that is ultimately what we shoot for. Now, another way that you can support the show, so we are on YouTube. Jake, did you talk about that already?
I did briefly, but go for it.
Yeah, so subscribe to us on YouTube. Just search Anaheim Calling on there. Jake posts the video format of the show, so the live stream, he posts it to YouTube, and those are fun as well. YouTube comments are notorious in internet history, and we actually get some pretty fun comments on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube and that's kind of your medium that you enjoy more, check us out there. We're also on Spotify and on Stitcher. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91, so go check him out. I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. And that is going to do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.